A mother and her son drive home through the storm. The church bells still echoing behind them. The boy asks if they'll make it before the bridge closes. She says yes. They're almost there. Locals still talk about that night. The sound of the engine idling through the rain. The headlights shining into nothing. June 16th, 1974. That was the night Stillwater lost two names, Lydia Crane and her 8-year-old son, Thomas. The town blamed the storm. No bodies, no answers. But the book they left behind, that was harder to explain. 50 years later, when the ground began to give way, investigators discovered something buried beneath the church foundation, a room full of ledgers dating back a century. Detective Mara Keene thought she was reopening a cold case. Instead, she uncovered a balance sheet written in lives and realized the ledger was still adding names. This is the Stillwater Ledger. Some debts are never paid in full. Subscribe before the next entry is written. Stillwater Lake, 1974. The storm came in wrong. No breeze, no warning. Just a black wall swallowing the horizon like someone had flipped the sky over. The lake, calm all afternoon, went black in a single breath. Wind lifted spray from the surface like ghosts shaken loose. On the far side of the bridge, a blue sedan crawled along the guardrail, wipers flailing. Behind the wheel, Lydia Crane squinted through the blur. Her son, Evan, 8 years old, pressed his face to the glass, counting lightning. 1, 2. Thunder cracked before 3. She smiled faintly. That's close enough for home. The radio stuttered between static and gospel. Then a voice, male, official, brittle, cut through. Severe thunderstorm advisory for Kingfisher County. Seek shelter immediately. She turned the dial down. Behind them, the church picnic had ended in laughter and damp plates, the scent of barbecue drifting through pine trees. Now the road was empty. Just Lydia, Evan, and the endless hum of tires on wet asphalt. They were 5 miles from Stillwater when the headlights caught something, figures near the shoulder, 2 men in yellow slickers waving. The rain turned them silver. Lydia slowed. One stepped forward, hand raised, palm flat against the downpour. "Bridge is out!" he shouted, voice lost to thunder. "Turn around!" She nodded, shifting into reverse. Evan leaned forward. "Mom, did you see?" But his words vanished under a blinding flash. The car jerked once. The radio screamed with feedback. Then, silence. By morning, the storm was gone. Only the blue sedan remained, parked neatly by the water's edge, both doors closed. Groceries in the back seat, picnic blanket folded in the trunk. The first deputy on scene wrote in his report. No sign of struggle, no footprints to waterline. Lake 2 feet above projected level, logged as possible accidental drowning. But the divers found nothing, and on the passenger seat, sealed in a plastic lunch bag, lay a single folded note. 3 words in smudged pencil. Ledger. Don't sign. 51 years later, the lake looked smaller. The county had drained it twice since the droughts, exposing the old bridge pylons like ribs breaking the surface. When Detective Mara Keene pulled into the gravel lot, her radio was already alive with chatter. Local news trucks lined the shore, white vans, satellite dishes, microphones like drawn weapons. She killed the engine, watching the reflection of red lights stutter across the water. The arrest had gone public 30 minutes ago. Reverend Alan Marin, 74, long-retired pastor of Stillwater Baptist, charged with obstruction of justice and unlawful concealment of evidence in the Crane disappearance. The town had erupted. She stepped out, heat pressing like breath against her skin. Across the parking lot, the new sheriff, young, uncomfortable in his uniform, met her halfway. "They're saying you reopen this," he said. "I didn't reopen it," Keene answered. "The evidence did." He handed her a folder, edges damp with humidity. Inside, a photograph, grainy, black and white. Lydia Crane, smiling beside her son, picnic table behind them, sunlight off the lake. Someone, likely Marin, had drawn a faint pencil X over her face. Keene flipped the page. An evidence log. Item 47. Bound ledger, water damaged, retrieved from rectory basement. Ledger was found 2 days ago during renovations, the sheriff said. Marin's initials on the inside cover. Same handwriting as the note left in her car. Keene traced the photo with her thumb. How long's he been living here? Never left. Retired 10 years ago. Keeps the church open for weddings, funerals, and now... He hesitated. Claims the ledger's not his. Says it belonged to her, Lydia Crane. Yeah. Says she gave it to him the night she disappeared. Keene closed the folder. The air smelled of copper and algae. At the waterline, floodlights illuminated a small tent where technicians cataloged artifacts. Shoes, glass shards, the warped frame of a child's bicycle. She walked closer. The ground gave softly underfoot. The lake whispered in the reeds, restless, conspiratorial. "Ma'am," one tech called. "You might want to see this." He held up a rusted key ring. The tags were corroded, but she could still read the imprint. Stillwater Baptist Archive. Sublevel access. She looked toward the church steeple rising beyond the trees, cross glinting in the late sun. Sublevel? She asked. Basement beneath the rectory, sealed since 1975. The tech paused. Sheriff said the Reverend called it the crypt. Keene's pulse flicked once. Get a team. We're opening it tonight. She turned back toward the water. Across the lake, lightning flickered on the horizon. For a moment she thought she saw two faint shapes standing by the ruined bridge, still, side by side, as if waiting for a ride home. When she blinked, they were gone. By the time the floodlights dimmed across the lake, Stillwater Baptist looked less like a church than a wound that never healed. The white paint had peeled to gray. Ivy crawled up the bell tower as if the vines wanted to drag it under. Inside, the air carried the smell of candle wax, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like old coins left in a jar of water. Detective Mara Keene stepped through the doorway with her flashlight cutting a narrow beam down the aisle. The wooden pews groaned under their own age. On the pulpit, a Bible lay open to Job, pages curled by humidity. The sheriff trailed behind her, trying to keep quiet. Basement doors through the vestry. Maintenance sealed it with plywood in '75. Reverend says the floor flooded after the storm. Storm didn't flood basements this far uphill, Keene said. What's really under there? He didn't answer. They passed framed photographs of Sunday school classes, the smiling faces of children who'd grown old or left town decades ago. At the end of the corridor, the plywood barrier waited. Rusted nails, warped wood, faint black water stains creeping upward. Keene motioned for the crowbar. The first pull shrieked through the silence. Each board came loose reluctantly, as though the church itself resisted the intrusion. Behind the barrier lay a metal door. Stamped on the handle was a small cross within a circle. Her light caught it and flared. Sublevel access, she read aloud. The lock gave after one good shove. Damp air rolled up from below, smelling of wet stone and paper. Jesus, the sheriff murmured. Stay close. The stairs descended steeply, concrete slick under their boots. At the bottom, her flashlight found shelves. Rows of ledgers and hymnals and tithing books stacked so tight the walls looked built out of paper. The church hadn't just kept records. It had poured a second foundation out of ink. The shelves along the far wall had collapsed. Water pooled ankle-deep around them. A single book rested on a wooden stool at the room's center, wrapped in clear plastic, tag marked Evidence 47. Keene crouched. The binding was swollen, its leather darkened to near black. When she peeled the plastic away, the cover left a residue on her gloves like damp ash. Stamped faintly across the front, Stillwater Ledger, 1974. Inside, the handwriting shifted page to page, sometimes neat, sometimes frantic, the ink bleeding in places where water had touched. Names filled the margins, columns of dates and offering amounts, then, halfway through, the format broke. A new hand took over. June 14, 1974, LC. He says the water is higher than the bridge. He says it's time to balance the books. Keene turned another page. June 15, 1974, LC. I heard the lake breathing last night. She felt the sheriff's light steady on her shoulder. LC, he said quietly. Lydia Crane. The pages ahead were blank except for faint indentations, as if someone had pressed words with a pen that ran dry. Keene tilted the book toward the light. The impressions formed fragments, not debt. Names, ledger isn't money. She closed it carefully. Bag it. Forensics gets first look. As the text moved in, her radio crackled. Detective Keene, dispatch, the voice said. You'd better come outside. They emerged into a storm of flashbulbs. Reporters shouted questions. Is the Reverend cooperating? Was a body found? Does this relate to the 1974 disappearances? Keene kept walking. The sheriff blocked their path, waving them off. At the edge of the parking lot, a black sedan idled, headlights off. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, camera bag slung over one shoulder. Detective Keene. Who's asking? Rowan Ellis, Channel 4 Documentaries. We've been covering the cold case initiative. I heard about the arrest. Keene frowned. That was sealed until this morning. Rowan smiled thinly. Welcome to the age of leaks. She pulled a photograph from her pocket. Lydia Crane, standing beside a man in clerical collar. Reverend Marin, younger, smiling. You know this one? Rowan asked. Taken 2 weeks before the disappearance. What's strange is where I found it. In the county assessor's file for land deeds. Same plot that's under the lake now. Keene studied the picture. In the background, a sign read, Stillwater Development Company, future home of the Ridge Resort. Developers were planning to drain part of the lake back then, Rowan said. Marin chaired the zoning board. Lydia Crane was the clerk who notarized the deeds. So why did she vanish? That's the question. Rowan's eyes glinted behind rain-specked glasses. And you just found the ledger she warned about. Keene's radio hissed again. Detective, the Reverend's requesting counsel, but he asked for you first. Where? County lockup. She looked past Rowan to the lake. The moon had risen, a thin, bruised coin over black water. He can wait until morning, she said. That night she couldn't sleep. The hotel walls hummed faintly, the sound of air conditioning through old vents. She laid the copy photographs across the bedspread. Lydia Crane's smile, the church picnic, the note from the car. Ledger. Don't sign. She remembered her father, an accountant who'd called every sin a misbalance. If you hide it long enough, the numbers balance themselves in blood, he used to say when the whiskey spoke. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A man's voice, barely a whisper. Detective Keene? Who is this? Alan Marin. She sat up. You're not supposed to call out. I needed to tell you. They'll drain the lake again. You can't let them. The books were never closed. What books? Silence. Then, the water keeps accounts. Lydia knew. That's why she came to me. Reverend, where's Lydia Crane? A click. Line dead. Keene stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Outside, thunder murmured over the horizon. The curtains breathed inward though the window was shut, carrying a faint smell of wet stone and lilies. When she checked the clock again, the digital display had frozen at 2:17. The county jail was quiet at dawn. Rain had stopped sometime in the night, leaving a film of mist on the parking lot that turned the floodlights into halos. Detective Mara Keene signed her name on the visitor log and followed the deputy down the corridor. Each door that closed behind her sounded heavier than the last. Reverend Alan Marin sat at the far end of the interview room, hands folded neatly on the table as if he were about to lead prayer instead of face an investigator. His white hair stuck damply to his forehead. His clerical collar was gone, replaced by county blues 2 sizes too large. Yet his posture still carried the discipline of the pulpit. Straight spine, chin lifted towards invisible light. "Detective Keene." His voice was softer than on the phone. "You came early." "You called at 2 in the morning," she said, taking the chair across from him. "You said the lake keeps accounts. What did you mean?" He smiled faintly. "In Stillwater, nothing ever truly disappears. The rain just changes its shape. I'm not here for poetry, Reverend. I'm here for facts. The ledger," he said. "You found it." She set the plastic evidence bag on the table. "You tell me what's in it." He didn't reach for it. His gaze drifted past her to the narrow window where the fog pressed against the glass. "Lydia brought that book to me the night she died." "Explain." "She kept the church's finances. After the storm, she said something was wrong with the lake records. Payments that didn't match any parishioner, tithes entered under names she didn't recognize. She thought someone was laundering land deeds through donation accounts." Keene leaned forward. "Through the church?" "Through the town," Marin corrected. "The water district, the assessor's office, the developers. I told her to leave it alone." His fingers trembled once before he clasped them again. "She said she couldn't. She said if she didn't balance the books, the water would. She wrote in her car, 'Ledger, don't sign.'" What was she refusing to sign? Marin lowered his eyes. "The covenant." Keene frowned. "Meaning?" He looked up then, eyes startlingly clear. "Every generation signs a new one when the lake rises. They call it stewardship. I thought it was superstition until I saw what the divers pulled up in '74. He hesitated. There were bodies in the silt. Old, older than the town itself. The sheriff sealed the report, said they were animal remains. But Lydia had seen the photographs. That's why she came to me. Keene tried to steady her breathing. "You're saying she was killed to protect a local development deal. I'm saying she tried to unbalance an equation that's older than paper." He looked directly at her now. "Tell me, Detective, when you were by the lake last night, did you hear it breathe?" She didn't answer. He nodded slightly. "Then you already know." The door opened. The deputy stepped in with a clipboard. "Time's up." Keene gathered the evidence bag, but Marin spoke once more before she reached the door. "They're draining it next week. You can't let them. The foundation under the bridge is cracked. If they dig too deep, they'll open the books again." Outside, the sun was only a pale blur behind the fog. Keene drove straight to the county archive. The building smelled of dust and varnish, the kind of place where decades collapsed into silence. The clerk on duty, an elderly man with coffee-stained fingers, looked up when she flashed her badge. "I need every zoning document tied to Stillwater development between 1973 and 1976, she said, "and any correspondence between Reverend Alan Marin and the county commission." He whistled low. "That'll take a while. I'll wait." He disappeared into the back stacks. Keene sat on the metal stool, the ledger on her lap. She flipped to the final page. Water damage had blurred most of the ink, but one entry survived. Faint and precise. June 16th, 1974. L.C. He signed. "The water will rise until it finds equal measure." The clerk returned, carrying a box thick with folders. "Strangest thing," he said, setting it down. "Most of the 1974 paperwork's missing, but I found this stuck behind an old map." It was a carbon copy letter on church stationery, dated June 10th, 1974. Addressed to Kingfisher County Surveyor, Reverend Marin. "We acknowledge receipt of your donation and confirm that the partial draining of Stillwater Lake will commence July 2nd. As agreed, the lower basin will be reinforced with fill from the quarry. You are responsible for obtaining volunteer labor from the congregation. J. Sutter, County Planner." At the bottom, in faint pencil, someone had written, not fill. Bodies. Keene felt the chill rise along her arms. She folded the copy into her coat pocket and left the archive. The afternoon bled slowly into evening. At the edge of town, the lake shimmered with its usual deceptive calm. A few fishermen's boats drifted near the shallows. Keene parked by the old bridge and stepped out, watching her reflection stretch in the dark water. For a moment, the ripples seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. A voice startled her. "Detective?" Rowan Ellis stood behind her, camera slung around her neck. "Didn't mean to sneak up. You look like someone listening for ghosts. Maybe I am." Rowan pointed toward the far bank. "They're setting up survey markers. County contractors. Draining starts Monday." Keene turned the carbon copy toward the dying light. "According to this, it started 50 years ago." Rowan's eyebrows lifted. "You think they buried something down there?" "I think Lydia Crane found out what." Rowan raised the camera. "Mind if I film this?" Purely background, Keene almost said no. Then she saw the small red light flick on, the lens glinting like a pupil. "Fine," she said. "Just don't stop recording." The lake gave a single soft sound, like an exhale through reeds. Both women looked toward the center. A bubble of air broke the surface, then another. Beneath, something shifted, a shape too large for a current, too slow for a fish. Rowan lowered the camera. "Please tell me that's a log." Keene didn't answer. The ripples reached the shore and lapped at their boots before fading into silence. Behind them, the church bell rang once, though no one was inside. Morning fog curled off the lake like breath. Detective Mara Keene parked behind the Channel 4 van and stepped out into air that smelled of wet pine and camera cables warming in the sun. Technicians crouched by the shoreline where a tarp hid the excavation pit. A single orange marker bobbed on the surface, a reminder that the survey team had hit something dense just before dawn. Rowan Ellis looked up from her tripod. "You're early. The divers haven't surfaced yet." "I couldn't sleep," Keene said. "Thought I'd beat the press." Rowan handed her a thermos. "Coffee. Black as the lake." Keene took a sip, scanning the site. Floodlights stood like skeletons around the pit, their generators idling low. On a nearby folding table lay a spread of photographs drying under plastic sheets. Polaroids mostly, bleached to the color of nicotine. "Where'd those come from?" "County archive," Rowan said. "Someone mailed them to my producer last night. No return address." Postmarked Stillwater. Keene lifted the corner of the top sheet. The first image showed a picnic. July 1974. Handwritten on the border. Lydia Crane stood among folding tables, her son grinning beside a stack of lemonade cups. But behind them, just visible through the glare, a row of men in yellow slickers stood ankle-deep in the lake, driving wooden stakes into the water. Rowan pointed. "Same slickers the witnesses described the night she vanished?" Keene studied the reflection at the bottom of the frame. "There's a vehicle in the background. Looks like a truck bed, maybe construction gear. Can you enhance this?" "Already did." Rowan tapped her tablet. The zoomed image revealed faded lettering on the truck door. Stillwater Development Company. Survey Division. "The same company from the zoning letter," Keene said. Rowan nodded. "And here's the next shot." She slid another photo forward. Nighttime, flashbulb glare over rippling water. Two figures in slickers bent over what looked like a wooden crate, ropes trailing into the lake. Keene felt her stomach tighten. "That's about the size of a coffin," Keene said. And then, softer, "Or big enough for ledgers you don't ever want audited." "Or a ledger box," Rowan murmured. One more photo lay apart from the rest, face down. When Keene turned it over, the breath left her throat. It showed the inside of a church basement, rows of ledgers stacked high, and a single figure, half turned toward the camera. Lydia Crane again, hair wet, flashlight in hand. The timestamp in the corner read June 16th, 1974, 11:42 p.m. the night she disappeared. Keene whispered, "Who took this?" Rowan's mouth hardened. "Whoever wanted her to be found, eventually." A shout cut across the water. One of the divers broke the surface, waving. "Got something! Bag coming up!" They hurried to the dock as the diver hauled a yellow waterproof sack from the murk. It thudded against the boards with a sound too solid for mud. Inside, waterlogged film reels coiled like eels. Faded labels read ledger footage A and B. Keene's pulse kicked. "Where's your editing setup?" "In the van." "Let's see what's on them." Inside the van, the air smelled of ozone and damp clothing. Rowan dimmed the overhead light and fed the first reel through the scanner. The screen came alive in flickers of gray and static, an image trembling like memory surfacing through deep water. A man's voice, distorted by age, muttered from the speakers. "Recording for council review, June 10th, 1974, Site 1, Stillwater Basin." The frame steadied on a construction site by the lake. Workers moved in shadows, their flood lamps cutting tunnels through the mist. In the background, the unfinished bridge curved like a spine above the water. Keene leaned forward, recognizing the same slickers from the photographs. A banner flapped at the edge of the shot. Stillwater Development. Building the future. A second voice spoke off camera. "Keep pouring till the readings settle." The camera panned down to the waterline. A wooden crate was being lowered into a trench carved from the lake bed. Stamped on its lid, in stenciled letters, was L. Crane. Ledger files. The men lifted shovels, burying it under wet clay as the tape hissed to black. Rowan whispered, "They buried her work." Keene's throat tightened. "Keep playing." The reel stuttered, then resumed on a new scene. Interior, dim, the camera trembling as if handheld. A flashlight beam swung across concrete pillars. Then a woman's voice, Lydia's, breathless, urgent. "If you find this, don't let them fill it again. The numbers don't match the graves. The books." The sound cut to silence. Only her light remained, shaking wildly, until it caught a shape moving behind her. A man, face obscured by shadow, holding a length of pipe. The reel burned white at that instant, seared beyond recovery. Rowan exhaled. "It's murder, Mara." On tape, Keene nodded slowly. And whoever filmed it wanted proof, wanted the story to wait. She checked the timestamp in the corner. June 16th, 11:47 p.m. That's 5 minutes after the last ledger entry. Rowan stared at the frozen frame. "You think Marin knew?" He didn't just know. Keene reached for her phone. He signed off on the dig order. He was part of it. By evening, the sheriff's office buzzed like a hornet nest. Keene spread the photos and copies across the incident table while rain hammered the windows. The sheriff paced behind her, jaw clenched. "We can't reopen a 50-year-old homicide on conjecture." "This isn't conjecture," Keene said. "It's evidence." The reel shows Lydia alive inside the church basement minutes before she vanished. The project planner's signature matches Marin's, and what? He just decided to kill her. She was about to expose the bodies under the lake. The sheriff stopped pacing. Bodies? Keene met his eyes. Not just Lydia and her son. There were others before her. It's in the letters, the ledger, the photos. Every time the lake rose, they called it flood mitigation. But it was burial. The office lights flickered. For a heartbeat, the hum of the fluorescent bulbs dipped to a low, watery moan. Everyone froze. The sound faded as quickly as it came. Rowan's phone chimed, breaking the silence. She checked the notification, color draining from her face. "You should see this." A new email. No sender, no subject. Only one line in the body text. "Stop filming. Let the water close." Attached was a single image. The van's interior, shot from outside moments earlier, both of them on screen. The reflection in the window behind them wasn't their own. It was Lydia Crane, smiling faintly, eyes wide and wet as if seen through glass. The screen went black. Dawn rose pale and glassy, the color of tin. Stillwater Lake was calm again. Too calm, as if the night had never happened. Detective Mara Keene stood on the dock, watching the ripples bend around the orange buoys where the divers had finished their sweep. A lone heron cut through the fog and vanished into the reeds. Rowan Ellis joined her, thermos in one hand, laptop in the other. "I ran metadata on the email," she said. "The photo was sent through a dead server, Stillwater Community College. Their network's been offline since 2003. "Someone wanted it to look old," Keene said. "Or it is old," Rowan countered. "That shot of Lydia in the window, it could have been a reflection from the original reel." "Maybe residual frames," Keene shook her head. "Residual frames don't type threats." They walked back toward the police tape. The excavation pit had filled overnight with dark water that lapped against the edges of the plywood barriers. One of the deputies leaned over the railing. "Groundwater's pushing up. We can't keep it dry." Keene squinted at the surface. Something gleamed just below, flat, rectangular. "What's that?" The deputy shrugged. "Old signage, maybe. There's more metal down there." "Get me a magnet line," Keene said. When they hauled it up, a rusted street placard clanged against the dock. The words were half-eaten by oxidation, but one remained legible. "Waterline Estates, future home sites." Rowan stared. The development that never opened. Keene nodded slowly. Lydia Crane's project. She was auditing permits for this subdivision before she vanished. She brushed her glove across the corroded surface and uncovered faint etching beneath the paint. A series of engraved initials and a date, MK/LC/1974. "Lydia and," Rowan began. "Marin Cool," Keene finished. "He was county engineer back then. So they knew each other. They were partners." By mid-morning, Keene was back in the archive room at City Hall, the smell of mildew and old paper thick as dust. She found the Waterline Estates folder buried in a cabinet labeled Inactive. Half the pages were missing, but one map remained, a blueprint of the lake perimeter with bold red lines cutting across it like veins. Each red line ended at a square labeled WL Cap, followed by Roman numerals 1 through 5. Rowan leaned over her shoulder. 5 caps, like vents? Or foundations, Keene murmured. 5 sealed chambers. Her phone buzzed. A text from the sheriff. "County maintenance reporting sinkhole near Old Cemetery. Possible hazard. Sending unit." Keene felt her pulse skip. The Old Cemetery sat on the southern edge of the lake, exactly where WLI was marked. They were still 20 minutes out when the first call came in. Ground collapsed. 2 maintenance crew missing. By the time they arrived, the road was cordoned off, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of disturbed earth. The asphalt had sunk 6 feet in a perfect oval. Water seeped through the cracks, forming a small pool that mirrored the sky. Keene crouched at the rim. "This isn't erosion," she said. "It's structural failure." Something gave way beneath. A firefighter pointed to the water. "We're hearing noise from down there, like machinery." Rowan adjusted her recorder. The sound was faint but rhythmic, a low thrum that seemed to pulse with their heartbeats. Keene whispered, "It's the same sound from the tapes." The sheriff joined them, sweat beading at his temple. "You think it connects to the pit?" "I think the lake's hollow," Keene said. The words silenced the group. She pointed to the map spread on the hood of her car. "Each cap sits along the old shoreline. The blueprints call them waterline regulators, but the chambers are too deep. They were burying something, not holding water." "Burying what?" "People," Rowan said quietly. "The ledger entries, the missing years. They correspond to those caps." The sheriff rubbed his eyes. "You're suggesting the entire subdivision's built on graves." Keene looked back at the sinkhole, where ripples spread across the muddy water. "Not graves," she said. "Vaults." That night, The two women returned to the motel to review footage. Rain tapped the window like static. Rowan rewound the recovered reel frame by frame, stopping at the image of Lydia turning toward the camera. In her hand, just visible under glare, was a small notebook with a leather strap. Rowan magnified the frame. On the cover, embossed letters spelled out, "The Stillwater Ledger." Keene leaned closer. That's the name she used for her investigation. She kept records of every death, every land transfer, Rowan said. If we find that ledger, we can prove the cover-up. Or it proves something worse, Keene muttered. That she was part of it. A sharp knock at the door made both women jump. Rowan muted the reel. Keene peered through the peephole. No one stood outside. Only a single envelope lay on the doormat, edges damp from rain. Inside, a Polaroid. A fresh one, colors still bleeding. It showed the two of them at the sinkhole site, time-stamped less than an hour ago. Behind them, faint in the water's reflection, was a woman's face, pale, watching. Lydia Crane. Rowan swallowed hard. How could anyone take that? Keene turned the photo over. On the back, written in wet ink, "You're standing on the waterline. Don't break the seal." Rain slicked the county road like oil, headlights strobing across sagging fences and flooded ditches. Detective Mara Keene's tires hissed as she turned down the overgrown lane toward the address on the old blueprint. Lot 6, Waterline Estates, Project Office. The road ended at a gate choked with vines. Beyond it stood a house that didn't belong to any map, a Victorian husk balanced over the lake's edge, its porch tilted, windows blind with grime. Rowan Ellis stepped out of the passenger seat, rain hood up, recorder clutched to her chest. "No electricity," she said. "Place looks condemned." "It was condemned," Keene answered, forcing the gate open. Then Marin Cool bought the parcel in '78. Never lived here. Paid taxes till he died last year. "And now?" Rowan asked. "Now it's owned by a shell company, Stillwater Development LLC, reinstated 2 months ago." Lightning flared. For a moment, the house seemed alive, the porch rail breathing in and out with the storm. They climbed the steps, boards groaning like old lungs. The door gave way on the third shove, swinging into a smell of mildew and paper. Wet archives. Inside, dust motes swirled through their flashlights. Folders lay stacked on the hallway floor, their labels handwritten. Waterline, accounts, mortuary invoices. A desk collapsed beneath the weight of ledgers swollen with damp. Keene ran her gloved finger along one spine. The ink bled, but she could still read the title burned into the leather, The Stillwater Ledger. Rowan's breath hitched. She really kept it. Keene nodded. Every name she found, every transaction that paid for silence. They set up the portable lamp on a crate and began to photograph pages. Each entry followed the same structure: date, parcel, depth, initials. 1970. RJ, parcel 3, 16 feet. 1972. KM, parcel 7, 18 feet. By 1974, the names stopped being initials. The handwriting turned frantic. June 14th. MK says the caps are failing. He heard them under the water, says it's breathing. Rowan looked up. MK, Marin Cool. She was documenting him, Keene said, not working with him. Rowan flipped another page. A pressed maple leaf marked the margin. Underneath, written faintly, "If the waterline breaks, follow the ledger home." Keene frowned. Follow it where? Before Rowan could answer, a hollow crack echoed through the house. The sharp report of wood splitting. Their lights swung upward. The ceiling above the stairwell had caved in, dragging a curtain of plaster and rain. Through the gap, something metallic glinted. Keene climbed the stairs, boots sinking in rot. In the attic she found the source, a large trunk, its hinges corroded. She pried it open with the butt of her flashlight. Inside lay dozens of small glass jars, each labeled with a parcel number. Inside each jar, soil, hair, teeth, nails. Rowan covered her mouth. Oh, God. Samples, Keene murmured. Proof of burial. She was keeping evidence. Thunder shook the rafters. The floor trembled and a trickle of water leaked through the planks. Keene crouched. A narrow seam ran the length of the attic floor, perfectly straight. This isn't an attic, she said quietly. It's a lid. And whatever they didn't want the lake to swallow, they buried under the house instead. She fetched a crowbar from the car trunk. With each pull, boards snapped loose, releasing cold air and the scent of standing water. Beneath was a concrete slab etched with an emblem, an apple blossom, faint but deliberate. Rowan whispered, "Same symbol as the church vault in the reel." Keene knelt, tracing the outline. This is where they sealed it. What, burials? No, Keene said. The first ledger. They uncovered a small metal hatch embedded in the slab. Rust sealed it shut. Rowan steadied the light while Keene hammered the crowbar under the lip. The latch gave with a shriek. A rush of stagnant air burst upward, scattering dust. Below lay a narrow crawl space. Water glimmered faintly in its depths, reflecting their beams like mirror glass. Keene slid in first, boots sinking to the ankles. Her light swept over concrete walls covered in writing, names carved into wet stone, hundreds of them, layered over one another until the words merged into a texture of grief. Rowan crawled behind. These are all in the ledger. At the far end of the chamber sat another trunk, smaller, wrapped in oilcloth. Keene pulled it free and peeled back the layers. Inside were rolls of microfilm and a single photograph, the original of Lydia Crane at the church basement, smiling over her shoulder. On the back, in faded blue ink, "For MK, we kept them quiet." Rowan stared. She was with him. Keene turned the photo over again. A water stain had warped the image, creating the illusion of movement, Lydia's smile flickering like a candle. "Or he used her work," Keene said. "Maybe she tried to stop it." From somewhere below, the house groaned. The floor rippled underfoot as though the foundations shifted. Water seeped through the concrete cracks, pooling fast. "Time to go," Rowan said. They climbed out as the crawl space filled, slamming the hatch. Outside, the lake had risen several inches, waves licking the porch steps. Keene glanced back at the house. Through the upstairs window, a light glowed faintly, the attic lamp they'd left unplugged. Rowan whispered, "It's still on." Keene started the car. "Then someone else is still here." As they drove off, the house's reflection shimmered across the flooded yard, the windows burning like eyes. Behind them, a low vibration rolled through the ground, and the lake exhaled a single bubble of air that broke the surface like a sigh. The county records building smelled of ozone and paper, an old bureaucracy's version of rot. Detective Mara Keene and Rowan Ellis stood under flickering fluorescent lights, water dripping from their coats onto the tile. Overnight, the lake had risen another 2 feet, flooding part of the West Road. Emergency crews were calling it a groundwater event. But Keene knew better. The Ledger house had breathed. Rowan set her camera bag on a nearby table, glancing toward the clerk's empty booth. "We've got about 15 minutes before the morning staff comes in." "You sure this is worth the break-in charge?" Keene unrolled a map tube she'd stolen from the trunk of Marin Kuhl's abandoned office. If Lydia's ledger pointed anywhere, it's here. The zoning revisions from '74 were never filed digitally. These blueprints are the originals. She unrolled the parchment. Dust lifted like smoke. The map spread across the table, a patchwork of property grids drawn in ink. 5 red zones circled Stillwater Lake, each labeled WL1 through 5. But now, a 6th, faint circle had been added in pencil, farther inland, labeled WL-0. Rowan traced the ring with her finger. 0. A starting point foundation, Keene said. The first site. And it's not on the water, Rowan noted. It's under town. Keene stared at the intersecting lines until the geometry resolved into recognition. That's Main and Birch, she murmured. Right under the old post office. Rowan frowned. They built the post office on top of the first vault? Looks that way. The town literally grew over its own evidence. A gust of wind rattled the window panes. Somewhere distant, thunder groaned low, but Keene felt it more in her bones than her ears. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, like a pulse. Rowan rolled the map carefully. If that's the heart of it, that's where the ledger ends. Keene nodded. Then that's where we start. The Stillwater post office was a 2-story relic of sandstone and concrete, closed since the 1990s. Its windows were covered with plywood, its steps buried under autumn leaves. Keene's keycard from the sheriff's department still worked on the side door, though the building's electricity had been shut off decades ago. Inside, dust muffled every sound. Their flashlight beams glided over murals painted during the Depression. Farmers, miners, women carrying baskets of apples. The apple motif again, its petals curling into the shape of an eye. Rowan shivered. These were done in 1954, right? The orchard year Keene nodded. The first development phase. The muralist was commissioned by Stillwater Construction Company, Crow's firm, Rowan realized. They built the Marin Line, too. Keene's jaw tightened. History repeats itself and nobody learns. They moved through the back corridor to the mail sorting room. The floor was concrete, patched unevenly with a lighter gray slab. Keene crouched, running her gloved hand over it. Newer than the rest. About 20 years newer, Rowan unfolded the map and lined it up with the floor plan. The circle for WL0 landed dead center. Right here, she said softly. Keene took the crowbar from her satchel. The first strike echoed like thunder in a cave. Dust rained from the ceiling. After a few minutes of chipping, they uncovered a rusted metal hatch flush with the floor. Rowan steadied the camera. Rolling. Keene gripped the wheel lock and turned. It shrieked, then gave. Cold air spilled out, thick with the stench of soil and brine. After you, Rowan whispered. Keene lowered herself down the narrow ladder, flashlight clenched in her teeth. The shaft descended about 20 feet before opening into a circular chamber lined with stone. The walls were slick with condensation, pulsing faintly with moisture. Rowan followed, camera trembling. It's like the lake's underneath us. Keene swept her light across the chamber. Old equipment lay rusting. A desk, a typewriter, shelves of ledgers sealed in wax. A single hanging bulb, disconnected from any visible wire, flickered weakly as if reacting to their movement. Rowan swallowed. It's running on nothing. Like the house, Keene said. Residual charge. Or something else. In the center of the room stood a concrete pedestal. On it rested a glass case, fogged from the inside. Keene wiped it clear with her sleeve, and froze. Inside was a single ledger bound in red leather, the words Stillwater Original, etched in gold. Beneath it, an engraved plaque read, Property of Marin Kuhl, authorized entry only. Rowan's voice shook. He kept her ledger. He kept all of them. Keene nodded slowly, and used them to plan every burial. A low groan rolled through the ground, vibrating up their legs. The light bulb flickered harder, then steadied. Water began dripping from the ceiling, one drop at a time. Keene looked up. We have to get this out of here. She lifted the glass. The metal beneath hissed where her glove touched it, warm, almost alive. When she pulled the book free, the dripping stopped. Rowan aimed her camera. Say that again for record. Keene faced the lens. We've recovered the original ledger, Stillwater Vault 0. It contains evidence of systemic burial beneath municipal properties between 1954 and 1974. The bulb above them burst, showering sparks. Rowan flinched. "Time to move!" They scrambled up the ladder. As Keene pushed the hatch open, a deep crack echoed below. The chamber walls began to split, water gushing through. She dragged Rowan through the opening as the floor beneath them gave way, swallowing the pedestal whole. They tumbled into the mailroom. A spray of lake water shot through the hatch like a geyser, flooding the floor. Rowan clutched the camera to her chest, coughing. "You got it?" Keene held up the dripping ledger, its gold lettering still gleaming beneath the water. Behind them, something inside the hatch knocked once, then again, then stopped. The storm finally broke at dawn, rinsing the streets in pale gold. Detective Mara Keene sat in her unmarked sedan outside Rowan Ellis's apartment. The rescued ledger spread across the dashboard like a sleeping animal. Its red leather was water-swollen, its gilt lettering blurred into a dull bruise. Steam rose from the vents, carrying the smell of wet paper and rust. Rowan climbed in, balancing 2 coffees. "Print lab's open," she said. "If we hurry, they can dry scan the pages before the mold sets." Keene nodded, still staring at the book. "It's warm." "From the heater." Keene shook her head. "It was warm when I pulled it out of the vault." They drove in silence past the flooded park, the church spire reflecting upside down in the standing water. Sirens wailed somewhere across town. More sinkholes. The entire valley seemed to be loosening under its own skin. The print lab occupied the basement of the old courthouse, its walls humming with dehumidifiers. Technician Javier Ortiz met them in a haze of cigarette smoke. "You two again," he said, half smiling. "You always bring me cursed antiques." Keene set the ledger on the steel counter. "Handle it like evidence." Ortiz lifted the cover with tweezers. Late-century binding, handmade paper, ink's iron gall, shouldn't still be this fresh. He slipped on gloves and began photographing each page. The first entries were tidy. Survey notes, soil readings, parcel numbers. Then the handwriting changed, sharper, slanted, impatient. Rowan leaned closer. "That's Marin Cool's signature." Keene's stomach turned. He was the county engineer. He kept a personal record of the vaults. Ortiz adjusted the lens. "You want transcription? Print everything." He clicked through the next sequence. The journal documented each cap, its dimensions, the number of laborers, the depth. Beneath the data, a second column appeared in smaller handwriting. Initials and dates, LCDWSC. The names matched the missing from Lydia Crane's files. Rowan whispered, "He logged every burial like a building inspection." Keene read the margin note on the final page. "If the line breaches, return to 0. The pressure will release through the old orchard drain. Seal with concrete immediately." "The orchard drain," she murmured. "That's north of town." Crow's original site. Ortiz frowned. "Who's Crow?" "Founder of Stillwater Construction." Cool's mentor Keene rubbed the heel of her palm over her eyes. "They built this thing together." A drainage grid that doubled as a grave. The computer beeped as the scanner finished. Ortiz loaded the next set of photos, but the preview filled with static. The image warped, the lines bending until the text rearranged itself into new letters. Rowan stared. "Is that supposed to happen?" Ortiz shook his head. "No glitch does that." On the screen, 4 words resolved, shimmering against the gray background. "Return to 0." The monitor went black. That night, Keene sat at her kitchen table, replaying the real footage on her laptop. The images had grown grainier, the sound more distorted. When Lydia's voice appeared, "The numbers don't match the graves," the audio fractured into whispers that sounded like her own name. She closed the lid, breathing hard. The room smelled faintly of lake water. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice whispered through static, low and deliberate. "You open the ledger. You can't leave it unsealed. Who is this?" Silence. Then a faint hum like wind in a pipe. The call ended. Keen stared at her reflection in the dark screen. For an instant, she thought she saw someone standing behind her. Lydia's outline, pale and dripping. She turned. The room was empty. Morning brought another collapse. Main Street this time. The sheriff's radio crackled with panic. Half the town had lost power. Keen arrived to find asphalt folded in on itself, exposing a gaping pit that steamed in the cold air. The smell of concrete dust mixed with something older, organic. Beneath the rubble, faint rhythmic knocking echoed like a heartbeat. Rowan arrived moments later, camera rolling. "They say it's gas," she said. "You don't believe that?" Keen shook her head. "It's the vaults. The caps are failing. Then we need the plans for the orchard drain." "They're in the engineer's journal," Keen said, "but not the one we found. There's another volume. Cool's private log. He kept it after Lydia vanished. Where?" "His estate." Rowan blinked. "The one by the river." "That place is condemned." "All the better." The Cool property sat behind a curtain of pines, its windows fogged from decades of disuse. They entered through the mudroom, the smell of oil and river silt thick in the air. A portrait hung above the fireplace. Merrin Cool, handsome, confident, wearing an engineer's pin shaped like an apple blossom. Beneath it, the mantle was carved with words in Latin, Radis's custodian. "Let the roots keep." Rowan whispered. He knew exactly what he was doing. They searched the office. Blueprints hung in rolls along the wall. Keen found one labeled Drainage Phase 1. It showed a spiral tunnel leading from the orchard toward the lake. At the center, core vault. Rowan filmed quietly. "So 0 isn't the first vault?" "No," Keen said. "It's the last door before the heart." Lightning flashed through the window. For an instant, the portrait's glass reflected movement. Someone behind them. Keen spun, gun drawn. The hallway was empty except for a line of muddy footprints leading toward the cellar. She and Rowan followed the prints down the stairs. The basement smelled of limestone and wet metal. At the far end stood an open maintenance hatch, water lapping just below. Rowan aimed her light into the darkness. "It's flooding again." Keen saw something half submerged, a rusted toolbox. She waded in and hauled it out. Inside lay a notebook wrapped in plastic, the cover stamped M. Cool, personal log. She flipped it open. The first page was a blueprint sketch. The second held a single line, scrawled in ink that looked almost fresh. "If the keeper fails, the water chooses another." The house shuddered as thunder rolled overhead. A crack raced across the basement wall, spilling a thread of golden light like liquid sun. Rowan whispered, "Mara, it's coming from inside the concrete." Keen snapped the notebook shut. "Then we're already too late." The orchard had been gone for half a century, but the trees still drew their map in the land, 30 dark mounds where trunks once stood, each mound glistening with a thin sheen of water. The rain had eased to a fine mist that hung in the air like smoke. Detective Mara Keen parked beside the rusted "No Entry" sign and killed the headlights. The hum that had haunted the town all week was louder here, low and steady, as if the soil itself were breathing. Rowan Ellis stepped out with the camera rig slung across her chest. "This is the old Crow orchard, right? The one from Cool's plans?" "Phase Y," Keen said. "If we're right, the core vault sits directly underneath." A path led them between the dead rows to a depression in the center of the field. Rainwater had gathered there, swirling into a slow spiral around a metal grate large enough for a truck tire. Keen crouched, brushing moss from its rim. Etched into the rust was the same apple blossom emblem they'd seen in the other vaults. Rowan trained the camera on it. "That symbol keeps following us." "It's the builder's mark," Keen said, "or a warning." She slipped a probe light through the grate. The beam fell 20 feet, landing on concrete stairs, vanishing into darkness. A faint draft rose through the opening. Warm, carrying the smell of wet iron and decay. Rowan swallowed. How many people even know this is down here? Just enough to keep it secret. They pried the grate loose and descended, their light slicing through the mist. The stairs ended at a tunnel lined with brick, slick with condensation. Water dripped from overhead pipes in rhythmic intervals, echoing down the curve like a heartbeat. Rowan whispered, "It's like a lung." Keene nodded. If the town breathes, this is its windpipe. The tunnel widened into a cylindrical chamber supported by rusted beams. In the center stood a concrete dais about 6 feet across, engraved with a spiral of names, the same names from Lydia Crane's ledger. At its heart sat an iron valve wheel, massive and sealed with bolts. Rowan ran the camera over the inscription. "You think this is what Cool called the core vault?" Keene approached the wheel. A single line had been carved beside it, deep enough to cut through concrete. "In balance, we rest." Her flashlight flickered. The hum beneath their feet deepened to a slow throb. Rowan looked around nervously. "It's vibrating. Do you feel that?" Keene touched the valve. Warm, beating almost. "Pressure build up," she said, though her voice sounded hollow even to herself. "We're standing on the water table. The whole system's alive." Rowan's camera light caught movement on the far wall. Letters appearing in condensation, drawn by an unseen finger. 2 words formed, shining faintly in the moisture. "Go back." Rowan's breath fogged the air. Did you see that?" Keene's hand tightened on the flashlight. The letters were still there, shining wetly on the brick. "Go back!" But the air had shifted, heavier now, as if the entire tunnel were waiting for their answer. She forced herself to speak evenly. "Keep recording." They circled the dais. Pipes led outward in 5 directions, disappearing into black. The hum rose and fell like the slow inhale of a sleeping animal. Keene aimed her light into one of the side tunnels and saw what looked like cloth tangled around a pipe. She moved closer. It wasn't cloth. It was a sleeve. Inside it, bone. Rowan whispered, "Oh God, there's more." There were dozens, skeletal arms, torsos, fragments of cloth embedded in the concrete, as though the tunnel had grown around them. The flashlight caught a child's shoe sealed halfway into the wall. Keene turned away, nausea climbing her throat. "They used the workers," she said. "Poured concrete before the shifts changed." Rowan's voice shook. "Why build all this over a lake?" "To hide it," Keene said, "and to feed it." A deep creak answered her, metal shifting somewhere below. The dais vibrated. One of the pipes hissed, spraying a fine mist. The valve at the center shuddered once, then began to turn on its own. Keene lunged forward, bracing it with both hands. "Help me!" Rowan dropped the camera and grabbed the opposite wheel spoke. Together they forced it back, muscles straining. The hum swelled to a roar, drowning their shouts. Water exploded from the seams in the floor, black and bubbling. Keene yelled over the noise, "It's releasing pressure from the lake!" "Then shut it!" The valve stopped. The roar faded to a low, guttural rhythm. For a heartbeat, the tunnel felt still again. Then, faintly, a voice rose from the drain below. Not mechanical, human. A woman's voice, echoing through water. "Finish the ledger, Mara." Keene froze. Rowan stared at her. "What did it say?" "She said my name." The valve twitched under her palms, a pulse against metal. The name came again, softer, coaxing. "Balance the books." Keene backed away. The light flickered, dimmed, then failed entirely. In the dark, the hum became a heartbeat, impossibly close. Something brushed her ankle, warm, smooth, deliberate. She fired her flashlight back on. The water was still. The touch had vanished. Rowan retrieved the camera. "We're leaving." Now they stumbled up the stairs as the tunnel walls began to weep, water pouring in sheets from the seams. Behind them, the dais split cleanly down the center, releasing a plume of dark water that smelled of rust and lilies. The valve wheel spun freely, a silver blur. By the time they reached the orchard, the grate had disappeared beneath a whirlpool of muddy water. The hum rose one last time, low, mournful, and then stopped. Rowan gasped, hands shaking. "Please tell me you got that audio." Keen nodded numbly, dripping and mud-covered. "I got it." Every word they turned toward town. Behind them, the flooded orchard reflected the first edge of sunrise, red as blood. The morning after the orchard flooded, the town looked like something left too long underwater. Streets filmed with silt, windows veined with condensation. Local radio loops repeated warnings about unstable ground, but most of Stillwater had simply locked its doors and waited. Detective Mara Keene hadn't slept. The voice from the drain kept playing in her head. Finish the ledger. It wasn't just sound, it had shape, memory, the same cadence she'd heard on a decades-old interview tape of Lydia Crane, the bookkeeper who vanished in 1974. She sat in the small police archive, headphones on, replaying the orchard audio. The waveform fluttered, and beneath the voice came another layer, the faint click of typewriter keys. She increased the gain. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. The rhythm matched the pattern of Crane's old ledgers, double space after totals. Rowan leaned in the doorway, coffee trembling in her hand. "You're still on it?" "Listen," Mara said. She pressed the headset to Rowan's ear. "That typing, it's spelling something." They scrubbed the recording again. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. When they mapped it to Morse, the letters spelled one word: station. Rowan straightened. "As in radio station?" "There's only one left, the old WSTL tower outside town." By afternoon, fog rolled off the river, turning the highway into a gray tunnel. The station squatted on the bluff like a forgotten bunker, windows boarded, dish half collapsed. The door gave after one shove. Dust, mold, and the faint ozone smell of old electronics filled the lobby. Rowan's camera light swept across framed photos, DJs in polyester suits, sponsors' ads, a wall calendar frozen on August 1974. Keene murmured, "That's the month she disappeared." They followed the hallway toward the studio. The hum they'd left behind in the orchard seemed to have found its echo here, low feedback through unseen speakers. On the main console, the power light flickered, though no electricity should have reached the building. A single reel-to-reel tape spun lazily, unspooling hiss into the room. Rowan whispered, "It's playing." Mara leaned over, hit stop. The reel kept turning. She hit eject. It wouldn't. The speaker crackled, then a voice filled the room. Steady, calm, unmistakable. "This is Lydia Crane, signing on for the last time." Rowan froze. She recorded over a broadcast. The voice continued, "If you're hearing this, the books were never balanced. The names you buried will not stay still. The water remembers." The air grew colder. The second reel began to spin backward, producing a reversed whisper, then a metallic click. One of the monitors lit, showing a single line of white text. "Ledger entry ver101. Keene, Mara. Pending." Rowan's hand flew to the power cord. "We're unplugging it now." She yanked the cable from the wall. The screen stayed lit. Mara stepped closer, pulse hammering. Her name blinked once, then the word pending changed to active. Static filled the monitors until the speakers screamed feedback sharp enough to make them both flinch. Then silence. The reel stopped spinning. Rowan whispered, "You said she disappeared in 74. "So how?" "She didn't disappear," Mara said softly. "She transmitted." She reached for the reel, half expecting it to burn her fingers, but it was cold. The tape inside was blank, the oxide long gone. Yet when she held it to her ear, she heard faint whispers, like wind through tall grass. A small red bulb above the console flicked on. On air. Rowan stared. The tower's dead. Apparently not. They followed the cable conduit through the back hall to the transmitter room. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling. The hum was louder here, resonating through the steel frame. A single rack still glowed faint orange. Beside it sat a second tape deck, older than the first, its reels labeled in Lydia Crane's neat script. Stillwater Ledger, master copy. Rowan filmed while Mara lifted the tape from the deck. A faint smell of smoke and lake silt rose from it. "This is what she used to broadcast the disappearances," Mara murmured. Each entry a voice. Each voice a name. Outside, the wind howled through the broken tower. One of the monitors blinked back to life, displaying a live waveform as if someone were speaking into a microphone they couldn't see. The pattern was unmistakable, the slow rise and fall of breathing. Mara's reflection appeared in the glass, faint and distorted. Another reflection stood just behind her, taller, the outline of a woman with hair down to her shoulders. Rowan gasped. "Mara!" The voice came through the speaker again, closer this time, layered over itself like overlapping tracks. "You finished the ledger once. Finish it again." The equipment crackled, lights dimming. The hum from the floor synchronized with the tower outside, a single pulse every 3 seconds. Somewhere in the static, faint music played. A radio jingle warped beyond recognition. Then, as quickly as it began, everything stopped. The room went dark except for one green diode on the master console. It blinked once for every heartbeat Mara took. She reached for the switch. The light blinked twice, slower now, and a final whisper emerged from the dead speakers. "Balance due." Rowan's camera beeped, battery exhausted, and shut off. For a long moment, neither woman moved. Then Mara said quietly, "We're taking the tape to the station lab. No one else touches it outside." The fog had thickened until the tower disappeared completely, but the wind carried a faint broadcast signal down the valley. A woman's voice repeating the same line over and over. "This is Lydia Crane, signing on for the last time." The evidence lab smelled of ozone and dust, a scent that clung to every machine in the Stillwater station's basement. Mara Keene stood before a humming bank of digitizers, the reel from WSTL sealed in a vacuum case. It looked harmless now, a brittle loop of tape gone the color of weak tea. But the technician refused to touch it without gloves. "Signal's analog," he said. "If there's anything left, it's hiding between dropouts. Might take hours." "Run it," Mara said. Rowan sat on a stool, half asleep, camera on her knees. The last 48 hours had blurred into one continuous heartbeat. Water, static, whisper, repeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lydia Crane's reflection behind Mara. The monitor flickered to life. Snow at first, then fragments of sound, breath, paper rustling, a typewriter clacking slow and deliberate. A woman's voice threaded through. "Ledger entry 49. The Holloways, unpaid." Mara leaned closer. She was reading them aloud. Entry after entry bled through the hiss, each name punctuated by a bell from the typewriter carriage. Then the tone changed. The voice grew strained, panicked. "Entry 72, Crow family. The foundation poured too soon. Pressure rising beneath the orchard line. Adjust balance or the ground takes payment." The reel hissed and popped. The technician frowned. "That distortion, something's modulating the bias tone." "It's not random." Mara listened again. Beneath the voice, the hum had returned, faint but rhythmic, matching the pulse she'd recorded at the orchard drain. Rowan whispered, "It's live, isn't it? That sound's not on the tape." The technician muted the speakers. The hum continued. The air itself vibrated. A drawer slid open across the room, slamming shut again. Papers fluttered off a table. The fluorescent lights flickered once and steadied. Mara forced her voice level. "What's directly under this building?" "Storage," the tech said, uneasy. "Old bank vault from when this place was the town hall." She glanced at Rowan. "Get the camera." "We're going down." They took the service stair through the concrete stairwell, each step colder than the last. At the bottom, a steel door waited, its surface marked by a faint spiral of condensation. Mara touched it. The metal thrummed under her fingertips, alive with the same slow pulse. Rowan aimed the light. Stenciled above the handle, barely visible, were the words, "Ledger Room. Authorized personnel only." Mara whispered, "This building's foundation predates the police conversion." Lydia Crane worked here as the city accountant before she moved to the station. Rowan swallowed. Then, this was her office. Mara turned the wheel. The lock gave with a sigh, releasing a breath of cold air that smelled faintly of mold, ink, and old soil. Inside, the darkness wasn't empty. It felt occupied, waiting. The beam from Rowan's flashlight cut through dust so thick it looked like fog trapped underground. The room stretched wider than it should have. An old records vault long since forgotten beneath the new building. Steel shelves lined the walls, stacked with ledgers wrapped in waxed cloth, hundreds of them. Mara stepped forward slowly. "This is where she kept the originals," she whispered. The ledgers were tagged with years: 1949, 1955, 1962, all the way up to 1974. The spines were labeled not with financial codes, but with names, families, workers, contractors. Stillwater itself written in bloodless ink. Rowan filmed, her lights shaking. She was recording everyone who went missing. Mara nodded, fingers brushing a spine marked Keen, family. Her stomach dropped. "That's my grandfather." She pulled the ledger free. The pages were brittle but legible. Each name had a number beside it, and each number was followed by a location. At the bottom of the final page, written in darker ink as if freshly added, was a single line. Entry number 102, Keen, Mara. Balance pending. Rowan caught the tremor in her hands. "She's been updating it." From somewhere in the dark came the faint shuffle of paper, the sigh of a page turning. They both froze. "Wind?" Rowan asked. "There's no draft," Mara said. Her voice echoed off the concrete, too slow, as if the room answered half a second later. A light flickered in the far corner. Not electric. Amber, like candle flame. They approached carefully. A desk sat beneath a hanging bulb that hadn't glowed in decades. On it rested an old royal typewriter, its ribbon dry and cracked. Yet its keys depressed, one by one, as though invisible hands were working them. T-A-key-E. Mara leaned in, heart hammering. The final key hit with a snap. "Take ledger." She reached for the newest book, but as her fingers touched the cover, the hum roared back, shaking dust from the ceiling. The shelves shuddered. Ledgers toppled like dominoes. Rowan shouted, "Mara, we need to go!" The typewriter continued to hammer, faster now, slamming keys into ribbonless air. The words etched themselves across blank paper. Balance due. Mara clutched the ledger and bolted for the stairs. Behind them, the vault door groaned as if something pressed from the inside. The hum deepened, turning into a slow heartbeat that followed them up the stairwell. They burst into the lab just as the technician stumbled back from his monitors. Every screen showed the same thing, rows of numbers scrolling faster than the system could process, the Stillwater tax records rewriting themselves line by line. Rowan panted. "What's it doing?" "Updating," the tech whispered. "It's adding names." Mara dropped the ledger on the table. "Then we shut it down." She yanked the main breaker. The hum stopped. The lights went out. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly from the reel-to-reel speaker, Lydia Crane's voice returned. Entry complete. The machine clicked off. By dawn, Stillwater felt hollow. The air carried the smell of wet concrete and burned dust. Somewhere under the streets, the hum began again. Slower, but stronger. Detective Mara Keene stood on the courthouse steps watching fog bleed from the storm drains. She'd spent the night cross-referencing the ledgers against town permits. Every entry matched a construction pour, from sidewalks to schools. Everyone was done by the same contractor lineage. Crow and Sons, later Crane Excavation, finally Stillwater Municipal Works. Different names, same symbol. The apple blossom. Rowan joined her, pale and sleepless. "You saw the ledger updating," she said. "It's not just a record. It's a contract." Mara nodded. "And it thinks I signed it." They drove out to the east edge of town where the river cut through limestone. According to Lydia Crane's final pages, the heart of the system, the balancing pit, lay beneath the original courthouse foundation, long since replaced by a new civic center. But the pit had never been filled. The last line in the ledger read, "Hold balance until successor arrives." Rowan said quietly, "You're the successor." "I'm the next bookkeeper," Mara answered. "By blood." They found the access shaft behind the maintenance yard. An elevator cage rusted in place, its cables snapped long ago. A spiral stair wound down the shaft wall. The air smelled of rust and rain. As they descended, the hum grew louder until it felt like a living pulse against their ribs. 50 feet down, the stair opened into a circular chamber. Concrete ribs curved overhead, slick with condensation. In the center stood a basin 15 feet wide, filled not with water but with thick gray slurry. Wet cement, still slowly turning. It pulsed with each heartbeat of the town above. Rowan whispered, "It's still mixing." Mara stared. "They've been feeding it for decades," Mara said. "Every sidewalk, every school, every church pour sends its excess down here. Not runoff, payment. This isn't a drain. It's the town's heart, and it only beats when something's owed." A faint voice rippled through the chamber, not echo but vibration through the stone. "Balance due." Rowan lifted the camera. "It's her again." "No," Mara said. "Listen." The second voice rose beneath the first, male, gravelly, ancient. "Finish the pour." The cement surface began to ripple, bubbles forming like breathing lungs. Faces appeared in the slurry. Workers, families, children, hundreds of them, mouths moving soundlessly. The hum turned to a low, unified moan. Mara backed away. "It's everything they buried. Every debt, every body," Rowan's voice broke. "What do we do?" Mara looked at the control valves along the wall. Old manual pumps, half rusted. Lydia tried to cap it from above. Crow tried concrete. Neither worked. Rowan's flashlight flickered across an inscription carved into the wall. "Ledger settles in kind." Mara understood. It wants a name for a name. Rowan lowered the camera, her hands trembling. "You mean a trade?" Mara nodded slowly. "Every entry is payment. They kept the town standing by feeding it one life at a time." The cement basin convulsed, waves breaking the surface. A child's voice echoed from somewhere beneath the slurry. "Finish it, Mara." Her name again, drawn out, pleading. The faces in the concrete turned upward, mouths open as if gasping for air. Rowan whispered, "It's calling you." "I'm the last account holder," Mara said, voice barely audible. "If I close the ledger, maybe it ends." She unbuttoned her coat, pulled out the worn book she'd taken from the vault. The pages fluttered in the draft, stopping on the final entry. Number 102, Keene, Mara, balance pending. The ink glistened wet, alive. "Mara, don't," Rowan started, but the hum rose to a roar that drowned her voice. The cement surged upward in a column, spraying gray mist. Mara staggered, clutching the ledger to her chest. The chamber lights burst one by one, plunging them into strobing darkness. In each flash, the concrete faces shifted. Crow, Crane, the Whitfields, Lydia Crane. Every lost soul she'd uncovered staring straight at her. Then she understood the ledger's command. It wasn't demanding a sacrifice. It was offering release. She opened the book over the basin. Pages tore free, scattering like white birds before sinking into the churning mix. "Take it!" she shouted. "Take it all back!" The basin convulsed, swallowing the pages. The hum climbed to a pitch so high it shattered glass meters above. Rowan fell to her knees, covering her ears. When the last page disappeared, silence crashed over them. The surface of the concrete stilled, smooth and pale. The hum was gone. The town above them stopped trembling. Rowan lifted her head. "Mara?" Mara stood at the edge of the basin, motionless, eyes fixed on the now solid surface. A hairline crack traced its way outward from beneath her boots. "It's done," she whispered. The floor beneath her gave a soft sigh. Rowan lunged forward, but Mara was already sinking, first her boots, then her legs, into the cooling cement. "Mara!" She looked back once, faint smile lit by Rowan's flickering lamp. Ledger balanced. The surface closed over her without a ripple. Rowan screamed her name until her throat tore, but the chamber only echoed the word back softer each time, as if the concrete itself were learning it by heart. Then the heartbeat stopped for good. 2 weeks after the collapse, the fog lifted from Stillwater for the first time in months. The air smelled clean again. No iron, no mildew, no faint hum beneath the pavement. To most, it felt like peace. To those who had heard the sound for years, it felt like the silence that comes after a held breath. Rowan Ellis stood at the river overlook, camera hanging at her side. The Civic Center ruin was cordoned off behind her. Federal tarps, men in plain jackets, plastic-wrapped pallets of soil marked hazmat. They called it a structural failure beneath an abandoned service wing. Nobody said the word ledger. The concrete heart had hardened into a perfect dome. Tests showed it wasn't ordinary cement. The structure had fused with the bedrock, a seamless shell no drill could breach. They said it was self-healing. Rowan didn't correct them. She held a small box in her pocket, a fragment of the ledger she'd salvaged before the chamber sealed. Its edges were damp, the ink still faintly alive, but the page was blank now except for a single word pressed deep into the paper as if by invisible keys. Settled. Reporters called her every day. She ignored them. She was editing the footage instead. The orchard, the broadcast, the vault, the last frame of Mara turning toward the light. She didn't add voiceover, just cut the clips in order. The final sequence was quiet, except for the sound of breathing, steady and calm. She uploaded it to her small YouTube channel with the title, The Stillwater Ledger, Final Entry. At the end of the video, the screen stayed black for 6 seconds. Then Mara's voice came, soft and even, as if recorded long before her death. "If you're hearing this, the ground remembers every name you give it. Balance your books before someone does it for you." After that, a click. Silence. The subscribe prompt flickered, just once, and went dark. Days later, the Stillwater mayor held a press conference promising a memorial park on the site. She said the town was moving forward, that no one should be defined by the mistakes of the past. But that night, as workers began to pour the first layer of decorative concrete, the foreman paused. The mix glimmered faintly gold before turning gray. He frowned, thinking it a trick of the floodlights. The trowel scraped over the surface, and the sound it made wasn't metal on stone, but a low, rhythmic pulse, one beat, then another. Far upriver, the wind stirred the reeds, and the water lapped against the pilings in time with it. In the morning, when Rowan returned to film the finished pour, she found a small, smooth stone lying at the edge of the slab. Someone had scratched 3 words across its face with a key. Some debts stay. She picked it up, turned it over, and saw her own reflection in the wet concrete behind her. Only she wasn't alone. For a heartbeat, another figure stood beside her, faint and smiling. Then the river breeze moved, the concrete shimmered, and the extra figure in the reflection thinned to nothing, as if someone had turned a page and the image didn't make it to the next copy.